Elon Musk has reportedly chosen the name Terminus for the first city on Mars. Once Mars is successfully colonized, how do you think the US might approach its governance? Will they claim sovereignty over the planet and implement laws according to their interests? How might this shape humanity's approach to inhabiting Mars and potentially other planets in the future? Okay, so, what could be the approach of the United States towards governing Mars? That's an important question that we have to consider today. And how could we try and determine what this approach could be like? So we can look at past history to see what's happened in the past. I mean, we have never colonized another planet in the past, but in the past, let's say 500 years ago, the Europeans discovered the Americas, rediscovered the Americas after the brief Viking period there. So the Europeans rediscovered the Americas and they started colonizing the Americas. And immediately you found that there were conflicts of interest. The Spanish had their agenda. They wanted to have the largest territory possible. The French wanted to grab territory. Everybody wanted to grab territory, and everybody wanted the territory and the resources for themselves. And you had wars that happened because of this. Uh, so initially, when you have just a handful of people on Mars or the moon, it's gonna be for all humanity and all that stuff. That's what they will say. We are doing this for humanity. But eventually, once you have a self-sustaining colony on Mars, the question will arise about its governance. And at that point in time, the United States will most likely declare that this is a US territory. I mean, it's a given. That's what's going to happen. And if the US is the only nation that is able to develop the ability to reach Mars, then they could claim that Mars is a US possession, the whole of the planet. It's possible. Um, and the same could apply to the moon. So initially, you would have a US territory on the moon, and you may have a Chinese territory, Russian territory, perhaps on the moon. I'm not sure if India even has any. I mean, India has said that we will have humans on the moon by 2040 or something, but it's all. I mean, it's far away in the future. The Americans can send people to the moon in a couple of years. So the US will eventually claim these territories as their own, as its own. And even more important, they will decide who gets to go to Mars or the moon and who doesn't get to go there. They will decide. They will set the criteria. It's going to be mostly US citizens. And if non-US citizens are allowed to go there, it's going to be citizens of nations that are closely aligned with the US and serve the US geopolitical objectives. So that's how it's going to be. And that's why it's important that India, nations like India, do not get left behind in the space race, because eventually it's all about control of resources. And the two or three nations that will lead the world in space exploration in the 21st century are going to be the two or three nations that control the world, that lead the world overall in everything. So right now it looks like the government of India has no ambition when it comes to space. There are some small space programs going on. There's going to be a Gaganyaan program, which is a technology demonstrator of human space flight, which will happen in 25, 26, probably 25, 26, the first human space flight. Um, and there's talk of an Indian space station eventually in the 2030s and so on. But India doesn't seem to be very ambitious. The government of India doesn't seem to realize how important space exploration is. Um, and space exploration is probably what will transform the US from a mere superpower to a hyperpower. Um, yeah, so that's how I see it. The US will eventually claim sovereignty over all the territories it controls on the moon, and it may claim sovereignty over the entirety of Mars if no other nation is able to develop the technology to reach there. So important that other nations participate in the space race and compete in the space race.